Hello, everyone, and welcome to this very special screening of Empire of Light. And very welcome to you, the writer and director of the film, Sam Mendes.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
This film is in many ways a celebration of cinema and the movie-going experience, but it also underlines how a theater can be a place of well-needed escape from the struggles of real life. I wonder if you could speak a bit about what the cinema has meant to you and why you choose it as a place for this story.
Yes, I mean, well, I was an only child, and I grew up with my mother. My parents got divorced when I was very small. And for me, my mother was unstable mentally, and a lot of what you see tonight in this movie, the character that Olivia Colman plays, Hilary, is based on my mother. So although it's not directly autobiographical, I'm not in the movie as a character, it's very personal. And for me, as in this film, the cinema was escape. It was escape from my life. It was escape from the tension of home, from sitting opposite one person, always the same person, who, even though she was heroic, you know, she was struggling to bring up a noisy, opinionated young boy. So there was a sense that it was a place of welcome. And of course, when I was growing up, that was the only place you could see movies, right? You had to go to the cinema to see a movie. You couldn't see it on television. I tell my kids this now. They're like, yeah, but you could see movies on TV. No, there weren't any films on TV. There weren't barely any programs on television. We had 2 channels, you know. God, I sound so old, but that is true, right? So for me, it was a place of not just escape, of imagination, of story, and part of the experience of watching a movie was watching it with other people and disappearing into that darkness, a theater just like this. And you'll see when you watch the movie that the cinema in my movie is not a million miles away from this cinema. You know, the little lights along the walls, the little dark patches, the sense of mystery. You can't quite see the edges of the auditorium. You don't know the person sitting next to you, or maybe the other side. That sort of thing. And for me, that was part of the excitement. So for me, I suppose that was my way in. And I also worked in the theater, and I had a similar experience. And a lot of my life, a lot of my professional life has been spent sitting in dark auditoria looking at something, you know. And for me, it's home.
I found a quote from you from one of those style breakdown videos on YouTube, so I trust that it's a real quote. This is the quote. I don't want to be known for one thing. I don't want to have an adjective based around my name. Lynchian, I know what that is. I know what Kubrickian is. And I know what Bergmanesque means. But there isn't going to be, and I don't want there to be, a Mendesian. If it's a real quote.
First of all, it doesn't sound very good, does it? Mendesian, does it? Mendesian, that sounds like a cheese, you know. Or Mendes-esque doesn't sound good either because it's 2 S's. I just gave up. No, the real reason is I've always felt like I wanted to find a style to suit each individual film. And I think what happens when you come out of the gate with one movie, as I did with American Beauty, that then wins all the prizes, there's a pressure. You feel a pressure. First of all, you've set the bar very high, and there's only one way to go after that, and that's down, right? So you spend a lot of time. I said earlier to somebody, I decided to treat the Academy Award as a bank loan, right? That I was going to pay off over many years. And I feel like I paid it off maybe 3 or 4 years ago. You know, I felt like, okay, I've done 8 or 9 movies now. But what happens then is that you have to decide, I decided, I'm going to carry on learning. I'm going to carry on pushing into new areas. I just have to accept that I'm going to be learning in front of millions of people who expect me to make a movie that's as good as my first film. So, but I did that. I made a big operatic gangster film. I made a war movie where, you know, it was all handheld cameras. The camera never stopped moving. You know, I made a big Bond movie, action movie. You know, so each film the film is the boss. You know, the film needs to be. We need to find the right style for each individual story, not to suit my filmography. You know, and so that's what I decided. And you know, that's not to say I'm not a huge fan of, you know, David Lynch and Bergman and all the others, but that's not me. You know.
Looking back on the films you made, if you had to say some things that are Mendesian, what would some of those things be?
I think you'll find a fair number of dysfunctional families in my movies. And I think you'll find a lot of men who are lost, from Lester Burnham in American Beauty to Tom Hanks's character in Road to Perdition to Jake Gyllenhaal's character in Jarhead, all the way through to Bond in Skyfall. But I think that you know, human beings will always be the center of it, even though they're genre. Some of those are genre movies, war films, gangster films. Really, they are about humans, and I'm interested in humans that have complexities and are not perfect, but are not all bad. I loved, you know, Lester Burnham in American Beauty because he was both awful and heroic at the same time. I love Bond because he is an anti-hero. He's in many ways a dark man. Fleming created somebody who was not a conventional hero, who, you know, was harsh with the world, with women, with himself, with violence, self-destructive. That's interesting to me. And that would always be my way in, the central character. And in this case, it's Olivia Colman's character, who is resisting being pulled down into the darkness of mental illness, which is the illness that took my mother in many ways. So, yeah, for me, I think that the common bond between the movies is the central character in some form of conflict. And the strangeness of family units. I said earlier today, the only functional families you find in my movies are not conventional. In other words, the moment you see a man, a woman, and 2 children, it's probably fucked up. But the moment you see a bunch of eccentrics working in a cinema, that's a good family, you know. And some of the people here, you know, you probably, or maybe it's not, but you know, hopefully it's good.
I wonder if you could paint us a scene from your early career. It's the Academy Award ceremony. The year is 2000, and they're about to call the winner for Best Director. You're sitting in the audience, and you're with your very first film, American Beauty, and you're 34 years old. Do you remember what was going through your head at the time?
Well, I remember that morning. There was in those days, they used to print copies of Variety, and you would leave them around in the lobbies of all the hotels. And of course, you know, and the headline in Variety was "Mendes, the only certainty," is what it said. So the only person who they thought was guaranteed to win an Oscar. And I was on the way in, and I was at the red carpet, and the guy from the BBC, the esteemed British Broadcasting Corporation, said, "You are aware people will be very disappointed if you lose." And I was like, how the fuck have I got here, right? Where to lose the Oscar for my first movie would be a disappointment to the entire nation. But that's what happens, right? You start with something small. We never imagined it would be an Oscar movie, not even one. We never imagined even one nomination. It was a small film. We made it for $10 million. You know, it was under the radar, and then it got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And so, yes, by the time the actual Oscar night came along, I remember my heart was pounding. I thought I was going to pass out. You know, it is, you know, and they say to you, the Oscar lunch beforehand, they go, listen, okay, 1 billion people are watching this on a like, but don't panic, just relax. And you've only got 45 seconds to speak, but don't worry, it'll all be fine, like this. And all you can think about when you get up there is, I mustn't fall over, I mustn't cry, you know. I've got to try and remember everybody. And I was sat next to my mother, and I got through the whole list of people I had to remember, but I forgot my mother. I got into the wings, and I thought, shit, like that. So I was supposed to go in to do a press conference. And I said, no, I can't go. So I watched Best Picture being announced by Clint Eastwood, a small young actor you may have heard of, who's like 7 foot tall, and he passed me in the wing. I was not supposed to be in the wings. He said, how are you? Congratulations, like, wow. And I couldn't hear, but I could see that the producers of American Beauty were up on stage, so we won. And then at the moment the show ended, I fought my way out and down back into the auditorium through all the people, clutching my Oscar, and found my mother and said, I'm sorry. So that's my main thought was to not make a mistake. And then about 5 or 6 months later, I was walking through the park in London in the rain, and I suddenly stopped and I thought, holy shit, I won an Oscar. And it took me like 6 months for it to actually land. I wanted to count, it was just impossible to compute at the time. Strange times.
With American Beauty, you provided a fresh look on sort of the repressed desires, but also the quiet beauty of American suburban life. Do you feel like your outsider perspective coming from the UK was helpful telling this story? I guess what I'm asking is, like, did you feel like that weird neighbor with a video camera shooting?
Oh, yeah. I'm all the different characters in American Beauty. There's a little part of me in all of them, I think. And I think when you make a good movie, you feel that about all your characters. You love them all equally with all their flaws. I do think it was helpful in that instance to be an outsider, and I think there are many of the great movies made about America were made by Europeans with an outside view. So you think of Billy Wilder coming from Austria and making Sunset Boulevard, or you think of John Schlesinger coming from England and making Midnight Cowboy, or Roman Polanski coming and making Chinatown. These, or Ang Lee coming and making The Ice Storm. They're all outsiders, and something is given to you, a gift when you're an outsider, which is you have a clarity. And I knew I didn't have that clarity about my own country to the same degree, which is interesting. But I felt I had it. But then, a lot of it was a sensational script, not written by me, written by a great, great writer called Alan Ball. And a lot of it was written in. And it's retrospectively, it appears to be a comment on America. But we didn't feel like we were doing that much of that when we made it.
You followed up American Beauty with something quite different, which seems to be a trait or a strategy that follows you through your career, changing lanes. Like, I guess you had a lot of offers with films similar to American Beauty, but you choose to do a gangster saga, the great film Road to Perdition. Could you tell us a little bit about that change of direction?
I wanted to do something totally different. And, in those days, I didn't know how to generate my own material. For me, I was waiting to be sent scripts, and that was the first script that came that excited me. But because I felt like at the root of it, it was about a child who doesn't know the mystery of your parents when you are children. And if you haven't seen the movie, he stows away in the back of his father's car and watches him while he kills a man and realizes his father is a hitman. So it seemed to have all these moral dimensions, but at the same time, it was big visual landscape. And the visual has often been my way in, certainly early on in my movies. So, it was that. And then everyone I said yes to, everyone I offered to the role said yes to, including Paul Newman and Tom Hanks. So it was suddenly,
Yeah, apart from Paul Newman, or let's talk a little bit about Paul Newman, because this was his final live-action appearance, and he's still at 77, magnetic in this film. How was he to work with?
I've said this, someone else asked me this today, and I said it was like working with God. He was he's a fantastic human being. But it was fantastic because he admitted his vulnerability. He wanted help. He wanted to discuss things. He was doubtful as to whether the life of an actor was a good enough life. And he spent a lot of time giving to charity and creating things that would outlive him and still do. Yeah, he was an extraordinary man. He had no entourage. There was nobody following him around. You know, his trailer was empty. You learn very quickly, be suspicious of the actors who have trailers full of stuff and people, right? You know, scented candles and chefs and, you know, people smoking spliffs, playing video games. There was no one in Paul's trailer. It was just like, I just want to work, you know? And that was the kind of guy he was.
I want to ask you a little bit about how you work with music in your films. Before this conversation, I've had a Sam Mendes week, rewatching a lot of your films. And
Sorry.
No, it was great. It was great. But now my Spotify playlist is like Tom Newman, and I don't think it's going to end. It's just, It's lovely. And you've had a long collaboration. Could you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I had a couple of really wonderful strokes of luck when I was putting together the crew for American Beauty. One was I worked with a great cinematographer, Conrad Hall, who sadly died after Road to Perdition, but who won the Academy Award for both American Beauty and Road to Perdition. And the other was I asked Tom Newman to come and make a small movie for no money, and he said yes. And the music, in many ways, defined that film. And that led to a very long collaboration. It's been a pleasure. It's been a stretch every time. There's always a moment where we think we're not going to make it. It's always a bit crazy and last minute, but it's always worked out well.
Throughout your career, you moved back and forth between the theater and cinema, and you've had great success in both fields. Do you still identify as a theater director at heart, making films, and also like what would you say these dual stages do for you in your creative work?
I feel like theatre is home to me, because you are in one place apart from anything else. Film is you're always stretched, you're always out in the world, you're always reaching. And I think it's fair to say that it took me about 10 years to feel really comfortable saying action and cut. And I know that sounds such a small thing, but with my first day shooting American Beauty, I'd never shot anything. I mean, I didn't, now every person in this audience has a camera in their pocket. I'd never operated any camera, no camera, right? Not even a video camera. But I knew what I wanted to see, and I had a great cinematographer. So I asked him the day before, okay, at what point do I say action? And he said, okay. And he laughed, and he said, well, sound will roll, and everyone will settle down, and you'll hear rolling, and then you'll hear the camera operator say set, and then you say action. And so, okay, right. So I'm waiting on the day. It's like, I'm in Hollywood, I'm in LA, and then you hear rolling, and then set, and then I go, action, like that. And then they start acting, it's like, wow. It's like, and then they stop acting, and I'm like, what's going on now? And Conrad leans over and goes, now you say cut. Like that. Oh, cut, right, yeah, cut. So that's how green I was right at the beginning. So, and then one of the things that with the Bond movie, it forces you to be a director with a capital D, right? You have to get out. Sometimes you have to get your bullhorn and go, yell at 2,000 extras and get people moving and step into the spotlight. You can't shrink back. You have to go out and be active. And I think it was on Skyfall that I really felt comfortable for the first time saying action. And now it feels like I have two homes. One is a sort of mobile home, which is the movies, and the other is a stationary home. And what happens is that I almost always, when I finish a movie, I want to go back to the theatre. Well, I want a holiday first, and then I want to go back to the theatre. And when I long for the stillness and the quiet and the peace of a rehearsal room. And then when I finish the play, I want an adventure. And movies for me are an adventure. So I'm very lucky to be able to do both.
Let's sidestep a bit to the First World War. You jokingly introduced yourself as Roger Deakins' director. I was curious to know, was he like the biggest driving force behind the choice of telling the story in 1917 in one continuous shot?
No, it was entirely me on that occasion. And he was resistant to begin with because he didn't want it to be a stunt. And when we talked through it, I convinced him that it was the best way to lock the audience into the movie and make them feel that they could not escape. And they had to live these 2 hours with the two characters, or one character, from beginning to end, whatever happened. and that they had to experience time passing as the characters were experiencing time passing. So there was a profound reason to do it that way. But my favorite responses to the movie, to 1917, were from the first audiences who saw it. And I asked the moderator to ask the preview audience, did you notice anything unusual about the way it was shot? And nobody said it was one take, one shot. Nobody. And I was delighted. It was only afterwards, when people realized it, that they wanted to talk about it. What they realized, they talked about long, continuous takes. They talked about taking the journey with them, but they didn't realize it. So I wanted to talk more with that movie about the why rather than the how, because there was always a danger it would just be a technical exercise. But why was because it was the best way to tell the story. And once Roger understood that, that's how we made it. It was difficult, and there were days when I wished I hadn't made that decision. If you're doing a 6-minute take, and 5 minutes and 45 seconds are perfect, and someone makes a fuck up in the last 10 seconds, you start again, and you have to do it again and again, and sometimes it takes a whole other day before you get to that place again. That's frustrating, and you curse yourself for not being able to edit. But at the end of it was something beautiful, and I was very, very proud of that movie.
Yeah, looking back on all the films you made so far in your career, which film would you say are you most proud of?
Gosh, I think that there are scenes in each movie, but I am a director, and you will never get, well, maybe there's a few directors there who are their greatest fans, but I am my least greatest fan, probably. You'll never get a director who says that there's perfection, and, for me, I see only the flaws, which is why when I finished the movie, I generally don't watch it again. And I haven't seen... I showed American Beauty to my eldest boy, maybe 4 years ago, and I hadn't watched it for 12 or 13 years, no longer. And he turned to me at the end and was like, Dad, that is a weird movie. I was like, I know, it is, right? That is a strange film. But it's weird. I mean, you have the relationship between the movie and you changes all the time. It's not like I have a Sam Mendes film festival every 6 months and which is my favorite now. I think that
like my week before.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've never had the week that you've just had. But I think technically, 1917, the feeling of achievement after that was extraordinarily rewarding. And I think it's also the last movie you've made. There's much about this movie here which I feel I love very much, and I'm proud of.
Yeah, we're gonna close up this discussion. I just had a final note. I know you had some issues finding the right movie theater where this film is going to be set, and I think it was Roger Deakins who said that when you finally found the right one, you can shoot any interiors because it had been turned into a casino.
Yeah.
So, and I just thought that sitting here in this theater that turns 100 next year, I just wanted to say thank you for being such a big supporter of places like this. So thank you very much.
These are the best places in the world, and we're lucky to have them. And one of the things we all realized in lockdown and during the pandemic is that don't take these places for granted. We didn't have them for 2 years, and there was a long period where we thought maybe we wouldn't ever see them again. We'd never be sitting here, full house, no masks, everyone. Just remember what it was like 2 years ago. We have very short memories, and it's these are places that we built for ourselves, these temples, and this is a particularly beautiful one. And I really hope you love the movie you're going to watch in it tonight.
Sam Mendes, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and an honor to have you here in Stockholm, but we don't want to leave you empty-handed, so I'm going to hand over the microphone.
Yeah, I only come when they give me awards. Not just awards, but the heaviest possible award.
It's the heaviest one. Sam Mendes.
Thank you very much.
I think you stay here.
Okay. So it's such a great honor for us to being able to present this director that not only have been a star from with his first film, American Beauty, giving him 5 Oscars. It's like receiving the Nobel Prize with your first novel. But also have a lot of skills in the theater format with everything from cabaret and all the plays with Shakespeare's company. But this bronze horse goes to your films, and the motivation is Stockholm Visionary Award 2022 is awarded to a director who took the world of cinema by storm. His visionary storytelling, sharp gaze, and lyrical cinematic language have made such a strong impression on audience all over the world. Empire of Light have gone right into all our hearts. So this year, Stockholm Visionary Award go to Sir Sam Mendes. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I can see you now. I was blinded. Now I can see everybody. I'm going to ask for some audience participation. No, don't worry. Thank you very much, Geet. Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be in Stockholm. You've made it so delightful for us. It's a special place, and I know it's boring for all of you Swedes. You know, I know you've made everyone from Ruben Östlund to Lucas Moodysson to Roy Andersson, but to come to the place of Bergman is a special thing for a person who has directed theatre and film and made a life of it. The beacon that was Bergman is a huge thing in my life, and I spent I had a little pilgrimage today to his theatre, to the theatre, and I was treated very wonderfully by them too. So it's special, I have a little story to tell about how this movie came about, and then I won't talk to you much longer. I promise. I am fortunate to be a father to 4 children, and our youngest is still 5, very small. And of course, she has not known me particularly as a director, because those three years of pandemic, in the middle of it, and I was at home every day. So. And she was talking about Mummy's work, and now my wife is a musician, and she was in the back of the car, and I was driving her to school. She's called Phoebe, and I said, "What does Mummy do for a living?" And she says, "Music." And I said, "And what does Daddy do for a living?" And she said, "Football." And I said, "No, I love football. That's true, but I make films and plays. I direct films." She said, "No, you don't," she said. And then I started trying to justify myself to my 5-year-old. I said, "I do. I'm in the front seat, I do. I'm a very important film. And she's looking at me like, you just, But she went quiet, and I thought this is a good sign, because when she was taking it in, she went to school, and then I picked her up the same day, and the teacher said, "Oh, she was telling us all what Daddy did for a living today." She said he directed films. And I said, "Yes, that's right." And then she said, "He directed Jaws." I was like, okay, I wish I directed Jaws, but no. I don't know where she got this from, but anyway. But it was fascinating to me because really, this movie came out of a time when we were taken away from the things that defined us, which was our work, our job. And we were only a mum or a dad or a child, and very personal things, I think, happened to everyone. And this was just the personal thing that happened to me. This film, the memories from my childhood, from my teenage years, bubbling to the surface in the first thing I've ever written outright. I'm very, very happy to be here. Thank you so much for your wonderful, warm welcome from everybody. And I really hope you like it. Thank you.